Order. Welcome, thank you. This is the meeting of the General Policy Committee. And we've got 3 discussion items on our agenda today. I think there's a request to move the fire station item to first. Mr. Hayes-Santos.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I had to go to doc's appointment at 3 o'clock. We can move that one. It's actual decision items. Move that we adopt the agenda with E3 as first.
Second.
Okay, motion is second. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, that motion passes. First order of business is approval of the minutes from August 11th. Were there any additions, corrections, or is there a motion to approve?
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the motion passes unanimously. We have Commissioner Chestnut absent. Okay, Madam Manager.
Yes, sir.
Fire Station 1.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, some GPC meetings ago, several months or so ago, we were directed to put an RFP out on a public-private partnership involving the sale of the property at 427 South Main Street, which is the old fire station. Phil Mann and staff were involved in that. I know that he is here prepared to provide an update on where we are with that. The RFP, I think, generated one proposer, and Mr. Mann, if you would, share with the commission where we are right now with that and our recommendation to move forward, please.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, Phil Mann, City Manager's Office. The Commission asked us to prepare a RFP proposal for the old 427 South Main Street Fire Station, and the idea was that we would do a public-private partnership with a lease. We held a pre-proposal conference. Several different firms showed up and asked several questions. The most common question we got was, is the property for sale or is it for lease only? And we told them that based on the direction we have received from the Commission, it was for a lease that would include roughly 12,000 square feet for the Art Center for UF. So when the proposals were due, we only received one. It was from Office America Group. It is in your backup. One of the problems the review team had with it was they provided several different options for design instead of just their best, latest, greatest offer. But in general, they were proposing a 13-story building with retail on the first floor, parking on floors 2 through 6, and then 156 dwelling units on floors 6 through 13. In their plan, they proposed using the existing structure for the arts building, and I believe the staff has shared with you the structural analysis of that report. The other thing, we had our finance department review their proposal for financing, and what they were proposing is the city fund tax-exempt 35 to 50-year bonds that we would issue, then they would pay us back over the 50-year time period. And the staff had many concerns with that as well. So staff's recommendation going forward is that we reissue the RFP with the sale option, but still include the 12,000, it'd still be a public-private partnership, and still include the 12,000 square feet of area for UF for the arts.
Okay.
And then the alternative would be just to simply sell the property.
Thank you.
But I know our objective is to accommodate the arts.
Yeah, 352, yes. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mann. Commissioner Santos.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's great there was a bunch of affordable workforce housing, creating a significant amount of housing in an area that's high demand. But the city financing, I agree, I don't think it's a good place for us to fund the whole entire project. I think moving forward on I guess not just selling the parcel, but selling it, bring back a development proposal with the land being sold is probably the best path forward.
Thank you. Anybody else have thoughts? Commissioner Santos.
Thank you, sir. Just to clarify, the new RFP would be only for sale, but keeping the art center, or just reopen it again as lease or sale, but either way keep the art center?
We would add it as lease or sale would be my recommendation to the commission. And I meant to say this during my presentation, but I didn't put it in my notes. One of the things we heard is they would like to get an option, discuss with the adjacent parcel owners to get an option on those properties, but they didn't feel it was worth their time or investment for a parcel that they were only going to lease. And so, that way they could redevelop the entire block. So yes, we would suggest that it be a lease or option to buy, yes.
Just any suggestions, so long as they include the art center.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. I liked the proposal until we had to take out bonds. That's what stopped it. But no, I'll agree with Commissioner Hay Santos. I'm fine with, trying again to see if anybody else, they see what was proposed and how we liked it and what we didn't like. So maybe we'll get slightly better options or finer tuned options. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Ariola.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for bringing this back before us. I'd like to move the staff recommendation.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second to move the staff move forward with staff recommendation to reissue a new RFP that would include an option for sale of the property. I'll just say quickly, it's so difficult for these large projects to get financing if they don't own the property. I mean, that's such a barrier, which is why they asked us to do it. Because there's just not many firms out there that are gonna, unless it's say a 99-year lease where it sort of, the lease outlives the building. So, yeah, that's not surprising. I don't mind that we tested the waters, but I think we got the answer back that was pretty expected. So, yeah, I think there's still opportunity there, and it would be interesting to see what a sort of larger parcel or multiple parcels would look like as well at that point. So, any members of the public wish to speak to this? Okay, move back to the commission. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right, up next we have a discussion first about the rate stabilization fund, and then we'll do the fuel levelization fund as well. So with that, Mr. Cunningham.
Yes, so as you all are very well aware, this year, and particularly this summer, due to the rising natural gas prices, which rising is really an understatement, they nearly have tripled in the last year, and that being a pass-through cost to our customers, as well as a hotter than normal summer and some longer billing cycles for our customers. Customer bills have been high over the last couple of months, and so GRU staff has been working kind of diligently nonstop trying to turn over every stone of what can we do to help customers in that situation. And I will share a little bit later different things that we've been able to implement, but one of the discussions that has come up numerous times is the idea of our rate stabilization fund and the use of that fund. We've talked about that a little bit publicly, but today we're going to give a little more robust presentation on that and what it's designed for and what it's used for, and ultimately a recommendation from GRU, as well as then how that relates with the fuel levelization fund. And so, like you said, there's two items, but we're going to kind of run through them both. You all know Claudia Raznick, Chief Financial Officer. She's going to kind of walk us through both of those presentations. And if you have questions, we can engage as we go. So with that, Claudia.
All right, good afternoon. I think most everyone has heard the term, rate stabilization fund as we're moving through our budget process. The rate stabilization fund is set up according to the terms of GRU's bond resolution, and it's a common term in the utility industry, so it's a common thing to have a rate stabilization fund itself. So it's under 506 of the bond resolution. The rate stabilization fund has been utilized to balance the budget in years past. So when you're looking at the way that the budget works, you have revenues coming in, expenses going out, and there needs to be some sort of stabilizing factor there, and that's usually the rate stabilization fund. So ideally, you're moving money into rate stabilization because essentially it's creating savings for the utility, and it's also part of the utility's reserves. When you're taking out, it's doing the reverse. It's reducing reserves and it's reducing your savings. So what the rate stabilization fund should be used for, it's there for essentially emergencies. So if there's a hurricane, you have the cash available to buy power, for example. If the billing system goes down and we can't bill customers, so you don't have that cash coming in, you can utilize the funds in the rate stabilization fund. Pandemics, we were taking a close look at the rate stabilization when we entered the pandemic. Back in 2019, we worked with PFM, our financial advisor, to put in a cash balance reserve policy. One didn't exist in the past. And so that actually created floors for reserves, and rate stabilization is part of that cash balance reserve process. We'll actually be updating the cash balances, that reserve policy next year, particularly in light of the volatility in fuel costs. And you'll see another slide later that'll show you what's sitting in the rate stabilization. So it should be used for emergencies. So impacts of not using it as designed. So it wouldn't be in compliance with the cash policy to have a certain level of reserves. It sends the message to the rating agencies that we will not adhere to our long-term financial plan as communicated last year during the budget discussions. Particularly one rating agency in particular notes the active use of rate stabilization just to balance the budget. They don't like that. And so if we're actually pulling money out to do X and not using it for reserves or emergencies, they will take a close look at that as well. If funds are pulled from rate stabilization, it has I would say, an unintended consequence of impacting base rates going forward, because it has to be replenished at some point because of those reserve calculations. So this is just a visualization of what was sitting in the rate stabilization cash. Let's see, that was at the end of July. So 34 million is sitting in rate stabilization, and that is a fund. So it's actually holding 34 million of cash. Operating cash is in the electric system. In the electric system, it's 6.6 million. And the reason why this is important is on a monthly basis, the utility is spending 22 million just to pay for things, and paying for fuel costs and O&M and for labor. So right now, we're actively managing the operating cash. So we have to pay attention, very close attention to what's happening in that account so it doesn't run negative as we're running our payment proposals. So you can see the electric system isn't holding a large amount compared to the utility spend. And this is one of the primary reasons why we'll be updating that reserve policy next year, because the volatility in fuel cost is what's driving a lot of this. So, and I have a slide in the next presentation that will show you the fuel cost volume by month, and it's as the general manager alluded to earlier, it's quite high. So we recommend not making non-emergency withdrawals from the rate stabilization fund. That's the end of this presentation.
Okay, why don't we do fuel, and then we'll kind of have a discussion about the whole big picture.
Thank you.
Mayor, are we going to take discussion on this item because it's a separate agenda item?
We're going to get both presentations, then have a discussion about both of them.
Well, I mean, but for public comment on the agenda item, there's two separate agenda items you're collecting.
We'll allow you to speak to both.
I want to speak to...
I understand, Mr. Scott, you can speak to both.
Oh,
I'll allow you to
6
speak to
minutes,
both.
right? 6 minutes.
Yes, Mr. Scott.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Claudia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think there's sometimes confusion about what the rate stabilization fund is and then the fuel levelization. The fuel levelization is actually a balance, right? So the rate stabilization fund is cash that's sitting there for emergencies. The fuel levelization is a balance. It either acts as a receivable or a liability. It's functioning as an under or over recovery of fuel costs for customers. They're two separate things. And so I want to make sure that I was clear as far as the balance, because if it's sitting as a receivable, that means customers owe the utility for fuel costs that have already been incurred. If it's a liability, then we essentially owe the customers for fuel costs that have been incurred. So that's why one says fund and one says balance. So the finance group at the utility goes through a calculation on a monthly basis, and we take the 12-month rolling fuel forecast from the Fuels and Energy Supply Group. They update it every month. We take that, compare it to the balance, right, the under-over recovery, and come up with a millage calculation in order to recover the fuel cost. And in this case, there's a negative balance sitting in the levelization fund. So that actually moves to the general manager, and it's the general manager's purview what to do with the millage rate. This is just a couple of pictures describing that. And this is the fuel adjustment revenue. There's taxable fuel and then that balance. So that what that balance does is it tries, you really want it to be at zero, and it has not been at zero for quite some time. So this is a pretty busy schedule. So you can see by month the expenses and the revenues. So the expense side are actual fuel costs. So you can see where the fuel costs started to accelerate last fall versus the revenues that were coming in. And essentially, it should be flat. It should be zero. But what was happening, and when you started moving through the spring and then, the summer into the fall, it started to accelerate, and then you started to have a spread that's happening in that levelization balance. So by the time you get to July of 2022, there's an under collection of fuel costs of 18 million in the fuel levelization balance. And that millage rate of 80 is designed to collect those fuel costs. So I had the rates grouper sitting back here run a calculation for me of the 80, which portion of that is recovering just fuel costs that we're incurring every month, and which piece of it is trying to essentially bring that negative balance forward. 65 mils is just covering fuel costs every month. And so we look at this every month going forward. You know, going through 2023, there might be some relief, but I will tell you that we had a recent month where we were thinking the fuel cost in 23 were actually going to drop by 21 million. By the next month, it was right back up. So I think the general manager's take on it is to keep the millage where it is to recover this. But this, I think, is a good visualization of what's actually happening in that balance. Because of the under recovery of fuel costs, I'm sorry, the other presentation, they were together. The presentations were together when I first started this. They got split, but that 6 million in operating cash, if we had recovered that 18 million, the operating cash would be 24 million. So that's what's happening. We are under collecting cash from our customers. So in the whole scheme of things, it's impacting our operating cash, our ability to pay for things while we're dealing with the under collection, plus the high fuel costs. I'm going to stop there because this is a busy slide, and I just...
Any questions about this slide? Busy but straightforward.
Yeah. Well, I just want to get plan.
So this is just a snapshot of what's happening around the state. I'm sure everybody's watching the same news cycles as we do, is where everybody's seeing fuel cost pressure. It's not just here in Florida, it's across the globe. We do recommend against using rate stabilization funds for fuel costs. We've had that question come in, is why can't you use rate stabilization? Well, we've covered the emergency, non-emergency piece of it, but using rate stabilization funds to buy down the fuel has an impact on base rates going forward. It shifts your fuel cost into base rates if you do that. That's the end of this presentation, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Earl.
Thank you, Commissioner. So, if 65 mils breaks even for fuel, replenishing that fund, what is your forecast? Let's just assume that natural gas prices stay as volatile as they are, which they have been for quite some time. Do you all have a projection for when we could expect to begin to replenish that fund?
It'll turn towards the winter months, but by next September, that's what the millage rate is designed to do. It'll start to reduce gradually going into fiscal year 2023, but the goal is by next September, it's going to be close to zero. And we've talked with the general manager because the fuel millage rate really needs to be adjusted on a monthly basis. So it shouldn't be left there and not adjusted. So we've talked with the new general manager about doing that. So once it stabilizes and gets to zero, I would anticipate it's just going to be a monthly change to keep those costs as close to zero as possible.
So I'll just add, so we have models that kind of are trying to predict where natural gas prices are going, are modeling our route back towards zero. Every month we will look at what the millage is, where we are on that track, and if we're able to start lowering it, we will. But we anticipate it's going to be still an extended period of time at the level it's at to start that march back towards zero.
So, Commissioner, it changes every month. So if I said, in January we're looking at it to go to 65, it may not go to 65 as far as the calculation. because of changes in fuel costs. It could go up, it could go down. Every month, we're running the calculation, providing it to the general manager, and he's reviewing it, making the decision on whether to keep the millage where it's at. You can see at 80, it's not quite recovering right now as far as July. The millage should have actually been slightly higher.
And I'll make one more comment. You know, as you look at this and it's negative, really the attempt is to try to minimize the impact on customers, right? By not raising it, you could raise the millage significantly higher. That's a cost to the customer. And so the attempt has been for an extended period of time is to raise it as little as possible to try to keep up with that cost. And as you see over time, it hasn't done that. It has, the price of natural gas continued to climb, and the millage rate we were establishing to recover that just each month was not enough to cover that cost and start to make that recovery. And so it's really an attempt, over time it's been an attempt to keep that impact to the customer as minimal as possible, but it has gotten to the point where we're not recovering enough from the customers.
So you mentioned that it looks like, based on your schedule, it looks like there's a period from February of '21 really onward where we were not recovering what needed to be recovered.
That's correct.
And that sort of, and that's really when the balance went from positive to negative.
And it started to accelerate in the fall.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I do remember how we dealt with this in the past. I believe that was through a series of financing decisions and different levelization policies, but unfortunately, it looks like the only way to deal with this is to keep the mill at a certain rate. Thanks.
Mr. Chestnut?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. What do you recommend we say to citizens when they ask, how can I lower my utility bill? This was very helpful. However, they may not have time to process all of what's being said. So what do you recommend?
Yeah, so Commissioner, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, I think that's a really good question, because the challenge we've had throughout the last really year or more is the impact that all this is having on the end customer, and especially this summer as it got hotter and people are using more energy and more power. So I do want to touch on a couple of things. So in response to that, us along with a lot of utilities, all utilities are facing this same thing. And so there were a lot of movements that people were able to make, no magic button, but different movements people were able to make. So a couple of the things that we did at GRU that we want customers to know and hear is that you can get an energy audit. So we've increased the number of energy audit where we'll come to your house, we'll look at challenges that might be increasing your bill, recommend improvements, and then those are actions folks can take to lower their bill. There are just energy savings tips, water savings tips. So there are things that any individual can do that can lower the amount of water they use, lower the amount of power they use, then that has a direct impact the very next month on their bill. So those are two things. Another thing we did was we stopped charging late fees. So as this happened, there was an article in Bloomberg News that 1 in 6 utility customers across the United States are behind on their utility bills. 1 in 6 are behind on their utility bills. And so by canceling those late fees, we did allow, folks are going to go a little bit longer before they have to pay, so they're able to do that. We also refunded some late fees that were in that month to the tune of about $190,000 of refunds of those late fees to customers that then allowed them to obviously use those funds for the utility bills. In addition, deposits. So we hold deposits for 24 months. We reduced that to 12 months, and we're able to give about $230,000 back to customers. That was their deposit money that they have back in their control. Now, I will just say there were folks that were disappointed with the deposits because we only return those deposits if you've met a certain credit, a score that on late fees that you've paid or disconnects that you've had, and if you didn't meet that hurdle, we did not refund that. But for the ones that did, like I said, it was about $230,000. Then we had some really good with LEAP. So you all had allocated money from ARPA to increase the investment in LEAP. LEAP is a low-income energy efficiency program. It really helps do improvements in people's homes. So we've spent about $445,000 of that money so far, and we've signed up enough people for the rest of this year and going into next year, the funding we have allocated for next year. And so we've been able to really help a significant number of customers directly improve things in their homes. Lastly, and this is a combination of several, but there's federal funding through Project Share, which is a GRU program where customers or employees give money to help customers, as well as the Central Florida Action Agency. We worked with several agencies and these different funding sources to help customers directly pay their utility bills. Over the last quarter, which actually ended in June, so not even including July and August, we were able to help customers with almost $1.2 million in direct utility assistance to help those customers. The last thing I will say is just for any customer that is in a situation that's difficult to pay their bill, is to call customer service. So our customer service, 352-334-34, is you'll get to somebody that can point you to these agencies and these funding sources, or we can do installment plans, or we can come up with other strategies of how best to work through your utility bill. So really contacting us directly, and then we can help get you to other sources is probably the best way to start as a customer that's really struggling. Trying to use less power, less water, and then contacting GRU is probably the two quickest things that could be done.
Okay, just one follow-up. Have you had any success with hiring meter readers and reducing the number of days
Yep.
and the billing cycle?
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. So we have had success hiring. We still continue to have some turnover, so it's pluses and minuses there. But we do have a plan in place to not have the longer billing cycles. So one of the challenges early in the summer was we had some billing cycles that were longer, and so what that does is that means you might be having a 35-day bill instead of a 32 or 31-day bill, which obviously you've used more power. Now, that would be trued up the following month as you get a lower billing cycle, but that was challenging, particularly in these hot months for customers. So what we were able to do is, again, hiring some folks, but we're also continuing to do some limited estimated reads, where if it looks like there is a route that is going to go over that limit of like 32 days, then we will estimate a read so that it keeps the billing cycle small, and then it'll be trued up with an actual read the following month. So we are continuing that in limited areas, and then hiring people so that we're trying to keep that as obviously as small as possible. And the last thing to really think about is, again, this is short term. I don't want to ignore the short term of the challenge we're facing now. But our automated metering infrastructure really is a long-term solution to the billing cycle issue and the meter read, the labor shortage, because that will have in place the ability to read just on a regular basis remotely and be able to kind of have that those limited billing cycles.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you both. I think this is a succinct way to explain really how we got here. Still, it's a little hard to swallow that we're still 18 in red. That's a lot. I will say I appreciate, because you sent us, I think on Wednesday, the one pager on just how much and where the funds have come from to really what you've been trying. You haven't just been sitting back saying, figure it out. So I do appreciate the many-faceted approach to helping. It's unfortunate, but this is how we're going to just brace ourselves for another while longer. I did have one concern, though. You mentioned it offhand in a separate conversation, but because you mentioned it, I'll bring it up now, that the possibility of deciding the rate by month. And that concerns me because of predictability for customers. So if we really are changing it by month, and it's rather significant, I think that's, the level of unpredictability, I think, is what really torments our customers.
Right.
I didn't, why suddenly it's this? What do I know about the price of gas right now? So it would be something that I think we are extra cautious before we implement. just to make sure we're not going from 30 to 60. 80 to this, like, oh, my bill's great this month. No, it isn't. It's that we changed the rate. So that just gave me a little pause. But otherwise, we have a plan. It's the best plan, I think, given the options. And we'll have to hold to it.
And Commissioner, I will add just to as Claudia was mentioning about changing it monthly. So the idea would be you're making much smaller changes on a regular basis instead of large changes over time. So you're not getting behind and then you have to catch up. So that's the model we would really move to. If you had a month where it happens to have a big swing, I don't think that would just be, I think that's something we're kind of talking about, how we would handle that, and that it would be handled different than regular small incremental changes. And so, yeah, I appreciate that perspective, and I think that's important, that if there is going to be a very major swing, that we really try to communicate that. And I will tell you, with the fuel, we started communication on the fuel adjustment in November of last year, that, this is happening. To be frank, folks didn't really notice that until a bill hits. I mean, when a bigger bill hits, is then everyone's like, oh my goodness, what's going on? But we were trying to get that message out there through a lot of different venues, that fuel's going up, natural gas prices are skyrocketing. But again, there wasn't the noticeability of it until you kind of get that price signal at your house.
If it's a couple points, nobody really notices. It equals a couple dollars, but you jump to 15, 20, then you notice. And that's the one that I'm more concerned about.
Absolutely, and we agree.
You seem to be observing it and thinking about it, so that's good. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Sutton?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, on the bi-monthly, I'm supportive of that for the reason it does allow you to do small changes, and that's where we got in this kind of mess if you're doing it quarterly or half a year. It wasn't really that thing, but we got ourselves too much in the hole because we weren't looking at it every single month. And by looking at it every month, we can make those small changes to deal definitely when we have high volatility. I think we'll continue to have high volatility with the kind of geopolitics of natural gas right now. As far as getting information out there on AMI, I mean, that is something also, a big thing. Also shows that we're making changes and making it easier for the customers. And have we started to communicate that and really trying to push it? I mean, that is a longer term solution, at least to the billing issue. I mean, definitely to the estimating, it solves that issue. But also people knowing I'm using too much power right now, I need to cut it down so I can actually keep my bill within having more predictable bills too.
Yeah, so Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, so we have some communication out there, we have things on the website and all that. The really intense communication plan, we're holding it, and the reason we're holding it is we're waiting to make sure we're getting all the meters in. So the world supply chain issue has kind of delayed the availability of supplies, and so we recently just kind of got word that we're going to get the electric meters in the next month or so. We have most of the water meter, we have some equipment on the water side that's missing. But as we kind of solidify that we're going to have that equipment in and we're going to truly start the mass deployment, that will kind of kick off the communication plan. And the communication plan is going to be really important because we're replacing over 100,000 meters in a several year period. And what that means is the communication network is in and it's working. As we start to replace meters, we're going to test routes. Once those routes are tested, we can switch them over to the AMI. But that's only going to be a limited number of customers at a time. And so it is going to be a difficult communication over the next several years because there's going to be customers that have that available and there's going to be customers that don't have that available. So we actually have a meeting set up on Tuesday to kind of talk about specifically what is that going to look like for a customer, how are they going to know that they're in or out, and what is that going to look like. As we work through those issues, that's then when the communication plan will really start kicking in. So we have all those answers as we start, and it's going to be a communication plan that's going to last 2 to 3 years, all through the project.
Yeah, I'm seeing Newberry's ads out there.
Yes.
They're rolling theirs out.
They are right now.
And then the timeline for that to start turning people on, is that January or February? Or is it
So you probably won't really, so the billing system is going to go live in February or March. So it probably won't be till April, May, June time period before you'll start to have some folks be able to go live in that. Again, that'll be a limited number, and then will continue to increase. And going back to the meter reader question, as that happens, we won't need as many meter readers, and so that will become less of less of a concern as we have those routes being converted to the AMI system.
To finish just on the question on what we're doing, I think one other thing to put on this is the rental housing ordinance, which is going through thousands of housing units. We've done about 25%, but that's finding places that have holes in the wall or AC ducts that are leaking and all of that, and that makes a significant difference. And renters are the ones who are hit hard, so the one usually the most lower income people in our community. So that's another major thing that we're doing, and it will take years for that to affect, but that will help reduce people's bills there. With the Inflation Reduction Act, there's definitely significant money in there for utilities and making utilities more energy efficient and things like that. How are we starting to tackle that, looking at that and seeing how we can fit that into it and helping to reduce our bills and also move towards green energy?
So absolutely, we have a couple of resources that are helping, whether it's our federal lobbyists, that Harry Glenn, or we're actually working with Holland and Knight as well, that they're helping to keep track of what are in the acts, what could apply to us, and what we can pursue. We have our individual departments are looking at those things that are available and seeing what's out there, and we're also trying to have a focused group in our sustainability office that they're really focusing on, okay, where are the areas we should pursue and go after, so that we're just kicking that off so that we're not trying to just catch things as they're flying by the car. We're trying to have a better plan at what should we actually go after. So we're applying for grants, and that's happening real time, but we're also trying to establish a better sort of overall approach.
And the timeline, have they already started issuing those dollars, or are they still working on rules, or do you know the timeline?
So I don't know the timeline on the Inflation Reduction Act. We're still working through several things coming out of ARPA and out of Resilient Florida. So there is a lot of opportunities right now. And it's I'll just step back and say, typically we're a mid-sized utility. We've always applied for grants, but typically we have limited ability on grants because we're a mid-sized utility, and a lot of monies go toward more rural, smaller towns, smaller utilities. That's just not the case right now. Right now, with the amount of funds that are being allocated, we are in the sweet spot that we can have access to a lot of different funds, and so we are pursuing those. The ones that have come out of ARPA and some of the other stuff at the last year or so, and then now engaging in with the IRA stuff.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank Tony, you and your staff for the effort you're putting into this. I know that y'all are working 7 days a week trying to figure out how to make this better. I know that it's not something you go home at 5 o'clock and forget about. I know that staff is consistently on top of this, and I appreciate that. The more often we can have these conversations, and the better we can understand this, the better the community can understand it. I mean, because we're your number one conduits back to the community. I would like to see us more active and more aggressive in the general communication back to the community. But I appreciate you all bringing this back to us again so that we can ask questions and understand it. What you sent us yesterday is your first bullet point in that about the challenging summer tells a huge story. Our cost for natural gas, which we use to produce electricity, about 65% of our electricity, went from $3.5 million a month last June of 21, to more than $16 million a month, June of 22. That's what folks need to understand. And then we have someplace to work from. Now, I know a lot of utilities did some work before that and hedged and did some things, so it wasn't as big an impact. We didn't do that. And here we are. Now, part of communicating that is to make sure that people understand when we say the cost for natural gas, what a lot of people hear is, well, I don't use natural gas to run my air conditioner. Why is that a thing? So it's important that people understand the fuel mix for how we produce electricity as well. But you cannot go from fuel costing $3.5 million a month to fuel costing $16 million a month in 1 year without feeling impacts throughout the system. I mean, That's a reality you can't work around. So thank you for pointing that out. I certainly will continue to put that information out there. I have several things. Could we go back to the fuel levelization chart? Thank you. One of the things that's clear, looking at this, we went 11 out of 12 months being upside down in the fuel adjustment rates, actual expenses. 11 out of 12 months upside down on that before we changed the fuel adjustment. From 11/20 to 11/21. We don't do that. That's not a decision that the commission makes. That's your office that does that. So I guess the bet was, and the hope was, that things would get better. But we kept going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper before the change got made, which results in us having to play catch up now, which is exceedingly painful. And I want folks to know that we tried. You know, the general manager's office made an effort, made a gamble on it. It was just the wrong gamble. And it was nice to not have to pay the extra a little bit along, but now we're having to pay significant catch-up expenses, and we'll keep doing that through, it sounds like, September of '23 is what I'm hearing. Is that?
It'll be adjusted, we'll look at it monthly, but
Right.
yeah, I mean, it'll be a good part of next year before we start to really get that recovery.
So knowing that you all recommend that we don't mess with rate stabilization, that we don't use that, which is not a new recommendation. I mean, that certainly has been the recommendation from the general manager's office for longer than you've been general manager. And knowing that that is a dangerous game to play with the bond rating agencies, we got to figure out some other things that we can do to help people have more efficient homes, if nothing else. So I have some questions about our energy audit process. It's a great program for anybody who's used it. It really is very useful. I do wonder if we could consider a name change, because audit scares people. I don't know what the right name is, but energy audit sounds like a bad thing. I understand the intent, but maybe there's a better way to term it. Moving on from that, which is superficial, I realize. My first question would be, how many of those energy audits do we currently do in a month, do you think? Round numbers.
So in this, from April to August, we did about 443 from April to August. So, you know, maybe 80 a month. I don't know. I'm doing math quickly in my head.
How many folks do we have on staff who can do those?
So right now, man, I don't want to guess, but it's a fairly small department. You know, 3 to 5 people are the folks that are out doing those directly in homes.
And would you say they're pretty well maxed out at this point, or do they have some extra capacity, or?
I think right now we are tapped. There's a lot of people that, again, the price signal has brought people's attention to it, and then we really try to advertise and market this so that folks know that it's available.
So if there's a silver lining, it's that people are getting their houses made more efficient.
Absolutely.
It doesn't have to.
Yep.
What I'm trying to get to is how we might push this out more. And I know it would require more staff to do that. But I'm trying to figure out how we could, rather than people calling us, you know, than us advertising it and waiting for them to call us to schedule, if we could maybe say, we are going to be in Lincoln Estates on, you know, Saturday the 20th or whatever, pick a date. We're going to be there. It's outside regular work hours. Come get in line. You know, and everybody in this neighborhood, we're going to try to hit you on that day. And really push it out some and move around neighborhoods and try to be as available as possible and with as little friction to the customers, to the owners, as there could possibly be. Instead of them having to schedule something and be off work to be there to do it, if our folks could be there and, you know, first in line, we'll go to your house right now, and we'll go straight over and do your house, et cetera, et cetera. It sounds like we probably don't have the staff to make that work right now.
I would say no, not right now.
But I wonder if that's something we could work toward, or if we could use maybe unfilled positions. Otherwise, I don't want to create the way to do it, but that's the model I would like us to move toward while our neighbors are in crisis. Finding ways to help them get out of crisis and go along with, you know, a role of weather stripping and a way to actively, quickly help out the things that are active and obvious. As opposed to also giving somebody, you know, the list of to-dos. And I know that we do some of that, you know, we take along the thermometer, we can leave with people and all that sort of thing. That's helpful. But if we could take the GRU in the neighborhood approach a step farther and say, not only can we do these things, but we're here right now to spend the next 8 hours in your neighborhood walking through your houses to get things done. Is that something that you all think might be useful and that you all think might be possible? And is there a way we could ramp up to try to do that? Or is that, it's just an idea? It's not the only thing we can do, but it's an idea.
So, Mr. Mayor, I would say I'd want to step back, obviously talk with our staff over precisely what something like that would look like. I do want to add a couple of things. One is, you mentioned GRU in the neighborhood. So GRU in the neighborhood is something else that we do have done, ramped up this year and done a lot more. And the purpose of that, really, a lot of it has to do with how do you lower your bill and things you do. And so we are kind of doing a little bit, we're not doing the assessment of the home side, but GRU in the neighborhood is working directly with customers in their neighborhood about what are things that they can do to lower their bills. The other thing I will say is we partner with like CWC. So I didn't try to go through, there's probably 12, 14 different agencies that we partner with. CWC, I think, is a great extension of GRU to do precisely what you're mentioning, Commissioner, in terms of weatherization and getting things improved in people's homes. So I think looking at that, looking at our staffing to see if there are other ways we can directly help the customer makes sense for us to kind of continue to evaluate that, and something we can look at and do. I would really need to rely on the staff to kind of figure out the precise.
So if we could maybe have some discussion about that over the next week and talk about it and, you know, give an update on that idea at next week's commission meeting, that would, so we can show that we're trying things. We're, you know, throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks.
Well, to follow up on that note, Casey and her staff contacted our church, and they did a presentation on how to lower your bill after church. There are so many churches that we could contact, send a notice to offer that type of service, and it would be taking what you're saying just a step further. But it went very well. I think some of our folk then signed up for LEAP.
Okay, yeah, the GRU in the neighborhoods like that, we definitely have LEAP signups. We have people, you can pull up people's bills, explain things in their bills to them. It's a very hands-on kind of approach that the people that are there, it makes a big difference, you know, in their lives. And so I think that's something we're continuing to do. And I know Yvette's group and Casey really kind of are working on that, looking at continuing to expand that.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, it's one of those things that there's no reason to not try it and see. Again, I think, I don't know. I hate to get into predicting something that we haven't tried, but my feeling would be if we just said, not associated with anything else going on, if we just said, hey, we're going to be in your neighborhood, you know, this day. I don't know what the response would be. Certainly, if we take advantage of things that are already happening there, that's where you're kind of like after church. You've got a captive audience and a subject that people are very interested in. How do I lower my bill? And then folks will stay around and sort of be engaged. And so looking for those, and GRU does this, but I think with this being really specific about getting in people's homes to figure out how we can help them lower their bill, as opposed to like, hey, we're here, here's a table, come talk to us if you want. So I'm just thinking like, the Porter's Quarters neighborhood block party, you've got basically the entire neighborhood there, having a good time, already, ready to interact. And at that time we say, hey, sign up, we'll get to your house in the next, week or 2 weeks, and help you lower your bill. Then people will do that thing. So, but there's no reason not to, we've done that with other things where we just say, hey, we're going to be in your neighborhood, show up. It's, and I think we could, especially with CWC, I think we could, and in Quanda, they were just at our meeting last week. They have access and credibility in a lot of neighborhoods, and I think working through them, you could immediately get some folks, that we're not going to get through a mailer or a web ad or something like that. So, I think it's worth the idea. And Commissioners, first of all, Commissioner Chestnut, I want to thank you for asking that these items be put on our agenda for discussion. It is important, and we're all hearing, the same sort of general concern from our neighbors. And you asked, I think it's the important question, what do we tell people? We can get into the weeds, as we sort of have done today, and there's a lot deeper, we can go. But that's not helpful, right? It's just, and so I think, it's not the magical answer that solves all the problems, but what I try to tell folks that ask me, because most folks that ask are genuinely curious, like why, and what can I do, right? So what I like to tell them is there are things that are under your control and things that are not under your control. And so the things that are not under your control are the rates and the cost of the fuel. There's nothing our neighbors can do about those two things. And then the thing that's under their control is how much they use. And that's what we're talking about here today. How do we help people use less? Because that, it's the base rate, the fuel, times the usage, and that's a bit right. And so, the more we can communicate to people that there are a lot of ways, and Tony, you gave us the stat before about with a minimal sort of set of investments, like below $100, the typical reduction in usage of the savings for the customer. Do you have that off the top of your head?
Well, so I'm thinking this is what you're referring to. If you look at some of our tips, one of the things I've noticed in talking to customers over the last 2 months is a lot of people don't change their air when they leave for the day. They leave it at whatever it is, and a lot of times it's a lot lower than what we recommend or what I have at my home. So people leave their air at 74 all day long when they're gone. Changing your air to auto instead of just on, so that it's able to cycle on and off, which I think most people do. Changing your hot water heater to 120 degrees, taking shorter showers. You put a couple of these things together and you can save $1,000 a year pretty quickly. And so that's a lot of money, and you can approach the $100 a month if you fix a leaky toilet and do things of that nature. And so it's not little dollars if you can make some of those big changes. And so
a lot of those are not major lifestyle changes, right?
Correct.
Like if you're turning up the thermostat when you're not at home, that doesn't affect you at all, right? And the other day, I usually do that, although I've been home a lot more than I have in the past. But anyway, I moved it up to 80. We keep ours at 78. I moved it up to 80 because I was going to be gone in the afternoon. I forgot that I moved it up. My family was home. I was home. It was one of those hot days, so this AC was sort of running, right? Which always, I grew up in a frugal family, so you can just picture that little dial spinning. But we didn't notice until like 6 at night, and it's, turn it back down to 78. So it's the little things that make a big difference. I think a lot of people, they kind of get intimidated or anxious about, like, I've got to buy a new air conditioner, I got to replace all my insulation. And while those things can help, that's not really what we're talking about. It's much more achievable, little measures that add up to a lot of money. And I mean, $1,000, even if it's $500, it's a lot of money for anybody, but especially somebody who's, living paycheck to paycheck and really struggles during the summer months. So, yeah, there's no easy answers, but, the more we can help people sort of have agency and take control of their bill, and that's the other thing, and I think as we communicate this, Tony, when you make these changes, it doesn't just help you next month, right? It helps you in perpetuity. Like every month now you're going to be paying less, and so it's really a long-term investment in that reduction. And I think, again, a lot of people don't, economics talk about marginal thinking. You sort of think about the next bill. What can I do to get my next bill down? But it really does have this like multiplier effect over a long period of time.
Absolutely.
And that might be a motivating factor too, if you really think about it that way. Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I will invite members of the public to come up and speak. And Madam Clerk, if you'll give Mr. Scott 6 minutes.
And before I start, Mayor Poe, can we put up slide 19, please, which is the graph? Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners, Nathan Scott. So if you look at this graph, you can see behind us since February of 2021, there's been a ever-growing deficit in the under-recovery of the fuel balance. If you look on the chart, there's an $18.4 million current under-recovery. That's, in perspective, that's half of your annual general fund transfer. That didn't happen overnight. There's been no public discussion about this since at least over the last 12 months until today. This is the first time we're seeing a deficit that is half of your annual general fund transfer to the city. This slide represents a systemic failure of the mayor and the city commission to manage and mitigate risk. This slide represents a breach of fiduciary duty by the mayor and the city commission to GRU customers. Your failure to be actively involved as the de facto board of directors of GRU. The problem here, folks, for the people listening at home, the problem's not GRU. The problem is the Gainesville City Commission and the mayor, who spends all its time talking about community IDs, changing the zoning, everything else but core government services. GRU has been the goose that laid the golden egg for the city of Gainesville. But this commission, over the past decade, continues to destroy what little value is left in what was once Florida's flagship municipal utility. You doubt that? Let's check the audited financial statements and look at what the equity now is in the utility. Last time I checked, it's about 18%, which means those words emblazoned on the side of the Kelly plant, the utility owned by those it serves, is fiction. GRU's no longer the utility owned by those it serves. It's effectively owned by Wall Street bankers. We heard some discussion from city commissioners here. I haven't heard any discussion about what portion of the GRU natural gas requirements has been hedged over the timeline in question. Certainly that explains a lot of this. Commissioner Ward fired the general manager who actually has expertise in managing this. So, we're looking at another deficit, another burden on GRU customers. It isn't going away soon because I just checked the math, and if you think 15 mils is going to offset this looming $18.4 billion deficit, you're not even recovering over the last 3 months the cost of your fuel. So, I don't think the gas prices are going to get any better, and we're already paying, GRU customers are paying a huge premium for fuel diversity. But that fuel diversity is not showing up in fuel savings. That's a fact, commissioners. It's not, because you expect with fuel diversity, this biomass plant and everything else that you virtue signal about, that we wouldn't see this chart. What the people at home need to know is that you're being gaslighted by a negligent city commission who continues to destroy what little value is left in what was once Florida's flagship municipal utility. And that's really sad, because I wrote an op-ed in 2013. GRU has a bright future if we learn from past mistakes. Not one of you has listened to any of that prudent advice. Look where we are today. 5 debt downgrades later. Commissioner Ward, you made a token reduction to the GFT only after GRU got debt downgraded the most recent time. We begged, pleaded to take action to avoid that debt downgrade, which cost GRU customers another $30 million in additional borrowing costs, which far exceeds the token $2 million reduction that you don't want to talk about. It's just a sad state of affairs. Commissioner Ward, you also said the more often we have these conversations, we haven't had a conversation. The fact is you haven't had any substantive discussion about the fuel adjustment charge over the past 12 months. Stop gaslighting GRU customers with your nonsense, Commissioner Ward. Again, you have an $18.4 million under recovery in fuel. Prudently managed utilities don't gamble with ratepayer money. And the amount of virtue signaling about how people should just use less electricity is amazing, absolutely amazing. That's the only excuse you have to offer. I mean, that's the point of capitulation. No other utility in Florida makes these excuses. Blaming housing stock, and no other utility does that nonsense. So again, I don't know if there's a way to get the public to understand there's no quick fix to this due to the ongoing mismanagement of GRU at the hands of the mayor or city commission, but I hope people will come out in November and vote for some change, because it's clearly needed, because y'all haven't minded the farm. You just roll your eyes at the public, and I've been saying the same thing for a decade, and all you do is roll your eyes when I come to speak, but proof's in the pudding. Look at the chart. You don't listen to me, you don't listen to former General Manager Ed Bilarski, you don't listen to the citizens. You just want to spend money on your pet projects, you have a spending addiction with taxpayer money, you've bled the utility dry, and you don't want to take any action. You just abdicate. So if you're not willing to manage and lead and listen to expertise, then you need to get out of the room. And I'll leave it with that. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else want to speak to this?
Hello, Tana Silva. Well, I don't know a lot of the ins and outs of energy, in the city, as Mr. Scott does, but I do know that the GRU debt for the non-renewable biomass and the general fund transfer are a huge cost to all the customers, that no amount of tightening up their window seals or anything like that is going to reduce. I have 3 other points that I want to ask about or mention is, one, the smart meters, the AMI. I saw a column from last year saying that it would cost the GRU ratepayers another $40-something million, or maybe $80 million. I don't know what the cost is, but certainly that is not going to be recouped for maybe ever, or maybe in some number of years. For 100,000 meters, isn't that going to increase also, the need for more electricity to run the meters? So another point is about the renter landlord code. I saw an article that was withdrawn from the Gainesville Sun about landlords proposing to sue the city because the inspectors, which now are going to be another cost to the city, were going through their rental properties looking for any infractions of the code, the International Property Maintenance Code, that nobody really knows what's in it. There's probably no building in the city that could pass every single thing. One person I know has had a rental condo, and she said it would take her $30,000 to fix it up to meet this code for her renters to possibly reduce their rates by $10 a month if the city didn't increase them again. The third point is about the LEAP Plus, that now homeowners at 50% AMI are going to have to compete with landlords of any amount of wealth. Donald Trump even could be a landlord and get $10,000 worth of repairs to his property for a tenant who makes more than the average median income. So I don't see the fairness in that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wants to speak to these items? You want to circle back to AMI and sort of talk about the cost benefit of that?
So, see, back in early 2019, we started having conversations with the commission about the cash balances at the utility. We talked about doing it was a restructuring. For those of you that remember that, it was designed to stabilize cash levels at the utility back in 2019. However, the positive benefit of stabilizing the cash also had a positive benefit of being able to cash fund CIS and AMI. And so that's what's happening right now, so that the debt restructuring pieces are essentially funding those two projects, as well as it puts some money into UPIF. There's some new money attached to that as well. So the goal was not to increase the debt load at the utility in order to put in CIS and AMI, and that's working as designed. It will continue to work as designed as long as we stay on the long-term plan for the utility that the commission put in place with the reduction of the GFT and the base rate impacts and the increases in the electric system and the wastewater system. So when we're going through that process a few years ago, it was a multi-pronged effect, but it had a positive benefit of it being able to pay for CIS and AMI. So.
One thing I'll add too on AMI is that you're replacing meters that need to be replaced eventually. So it is accelerating some meters. Some of the meters were overdue. Some of them might be due in the next couple of years. Some of them might be further out. You're accelerating that, but it's a cost that you are going to occur over time. But this allows to have a lot more information available for customers, like addressing some of these issues we're talking about. Information will be more readily available to address usage, as well as the reliability of the system, the ability for a utility to see things and predict things that are happening. The last thing I will just say is, to be honest, with smart meters in this project, GRU are kind of a little bit behind the curve. So, more than 3/4 of utility customers across the United States have this sort of technology in place. So we're kind of catching up a little bit in terms of this project. And so, I think it's something we all determined years ago it'd be very important for us to have and need and good for our customers.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to go back to that second point. It's really important that these meters, we would be paying for new meters either way because meters wear out, right? That we're replacing them with meters that are going to give our customers more power over understanding and managing their usage and their bill is a positive thing. But yeah, it's not like we spend this money for these new meters, or we wouldn't have spent it at all. We just would have spent it on analogs or old school meters. That doesn't get our customers anything. Okay, Commissioner, any something you had?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just want to address Ms. Silva's comment on the rental housing ordinance. If a landlord, if the person you mentioned has to spend $30,000 on their condo to fix it up, they're a slumlord. They have unsafe housing. There's no way that you should have to spend that much money, and that person is a slumlord. That's what this ordinance is supposed to do, is to stop those people who are renting out places that are unhealthy and not safe. And probably that person has a very high utility bill too, because there's bad stuff going on. Secondly, I want to address Mr. Scott's points. Painting, as we're talking about that, it's painting a very slanted picture and a kind of deliberate disinformation. We're talking about fuel diversity first. The biomass plant is actually helping us keep our rates lower. If we were all on natural gas, our rates would be much higher. So that fuel diversity is helping us. We'd be in a much worse position. Secondary on the GFT, saying that the reductions are trivial. The Commission's move, it's over the next 5 years, will reduce the GFT over that time by $30 million. $30 million is not a trivial amount of dollars. That is a big impact to our general government budget and to our city in general and to the utility customers in helping to reduce the rate pressure. Third, on the GRU fuel levelization. This is not a decision that the city commission makes. It's a decision that the GRU manager makes. And Mr. Scott mentioned Mr. Bilarski. And Mr. Bilarski was in charge of GRU when we started to get down to this deep hole and didn't make the changes that were necessary and needed. And we're having to dig out that hole because of that. He is the reason we're deeper in this hole, and he should have made changes earlier. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Again, thank you to your whole staff, Cunningham. Hopefully this was helpful to folks. We'll just keep working with people, household by household, to try to help them out. Okay, we are now to general public comment. Anything folks want to say that wasn't on our agenda?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Poe. I'd like to briefly respond to a comment that was just made about the token reduction in the general fund transfer. I stand by that. If we want to do some basic math, $30 million in additional borrowing costs resulting from the most recent avoidable debt downgrade before you made a token reduction to the GFT, which is only a couple years in its making. It's not $30 million. It's not a 15-year reduction of the GFT, so I'm not sure where that math came from. 5 years times $2 million is $10 million. It's not $30 million, correct? Okay. 2 million times 5 years is a $10 million reduction. Okay.
2 and 4 and 6 and then 8.
You're doing no. You're talking about cumulative. It's not. It's just a token reduction to further gaslight people of your insatiable spending addiction with taxpayer money. That's the problem here. Look at what's been done to GRU versus expansion of city government on the city commission side. You're going to raise our property taxes again tonight. You're going to raise our GRU rates again tonight because you refuse to show any fiscal discipline whatsoever. And I hope Commissioner Chestnut and Commissioner Desmond Duncan Walker will be the consistent no votes towards this nonsense, because they're the only one that acts like any adults in the room in terms of being on the dais, because they have fiscal responsibility. They know the pain their constituents are feeling. They know the pain of low-income households, hardworking Gainesville families, and local businesses. And what you guys are doing is, in your quest to be whatever, something else, is destroying Gainesville in the process and wrecking economic pain and hardship on hardworking Gainesville families, low-income households, and local business. It's just poor governance. Irrespective of politics, it's poor governance by any measure. And it needs to stop. And the voters have the opportunity to change that in November. Thank you.
Anybody else for general public comment? Okay, any member comment? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Madam Manager, is there a proposal for us to raise the ad valorem rate tonight?
No, there is not.
I didn't think so. Thank you.
Well, you had to issue a trim notice, didn't you not?
Mr. Scott, please, no outburst.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member comment? Commissioner Chestnut?
This is on a different subject.
Yeah.
I think at one time, we had the Citizens Academy. I think many of you are graduates of the Citizens Academy. And I was wondering if we could, in the next year, look at trying to bring that back. That, too, is another avenue to help citizens understand where we are and why we do what we do. But maybe that could come back.
Yeah, I never have met anybody that went through that and regretted it. I mean, honestly, 100%. So yeah, we obviously shut that down during COVID.
Yes.
But if the charters maybe in one of their 1-on-6s can discuss it and what that would entail. I know that the person who worked at the city that sort of was in charge of that no longer is with he retired. So it probably would have to, be somebody new to do it. But yeah, it's a great value. Any other member comment? Okay, we will then adjourn this meeting and see everybody back at 6.